proposed bill in the National Assembly seeking to make it mandatory for eligible Nigerians to vote at both state and national elections in Nigeria has continued to generate controversy among citizens. And our correspondent, Omo Bazare, went out and spoke with Abuja residents on the issue.
At the last count in 2023, Nigeria has a total of 93 million registered voters out of its over 200 million population. But despite the huge number of registered voters, only a little above 25 million voted at the last presidential election, representing a quarter of registered voters. Years of electoral fraud, other forms of electoral irregularities, and political violence have combined to erode confidence in the voting process. The results have been quite evident in a culture of apathy that has now characterized elections in the country. The proposed bill in the House of Representatives to make voting compulsory, sponsored by the Speaker Tajuddin Abbas, is considered in some quarters as a legislative effort to tackle the apathy and improve citizens' participation in the process of electing their own leaders and representatives.
It is high time that Nigerians are obliged to vote, because by doing so, I feel Nigerians would take more caution in whom they decide to vote for. Because if it's compulsory, then not voting will now be perhaps criminal, and they can be, tried and charged.
So many persons don't vote these days. I asked some persons, why didn't you vote? They said they didn't vote for anybody, because even though they voted, their candidate will not win. But it is important, if they had come out to vote, and many more like that, and voted the right person, possibly the person would have won.
But there has been a pushback against the proposed bill, which seeks to also impose a maximum of 6 months imprisonment or a fine of no more than 100,000 naira for Nigerians of voting age who fail to vote during election. Election observer YIAGA Africa is vehemently opposed to the proposed legislation on the grounds that voting is a right and that it cannot be criminalized. Many on the streets of Abuja share similar views, questioning how such legislation will be enforced. To others, it is a mere waste of time trying to force citizens to vote without addressing the underlying problems of vote buying and why citizens believe their votes do not count.
Voting should not be compulsory for everybody, because even if you go out and vote, they still have their own way of doing their magu-magu. So we all think even if we go out and vote, our right is not being protected. They still go ahead and do whatever they want to do.
Concerning the proposed bill by the National Assembly to make it compulsory for everybody to vote, I don't think it's a right bill to be passed at this moment. Looking at the lot of challenges that we are being faced in this nation, I think the least of our problem is making up a bill to make everybody vote by force. And let's look at it this way. What if the names in the ballot paper, and none of them are my choices there? So are you telling me that I must vote even though my choice is not there?
The proposed legislation to make voting compulsory for eligible citizens has scaled second reading in the House of Representatives, and it is bound to generate even more controversy in the coming days when it gets to the Senate as it progresses or hits a dead end. Omo Bazwai, Rise News.
Well, divergent views expressed there on the streets. Join me now, Samson Itodo, who is the founder of YIAGA Africa. They've been speaking already, and lawyer and the Rise News analyst Frank Tietie. Thank you, gentlemen, for joining us on the news tonight.
Always a delight.
All right. Samson, we already know where your organization stands, YIAGA Africa. You described the bill as draconian, proposed bill. Let me put that there. What makes it, in your view, fundamentally harmful to Nigeria's democracy or democratic journey that you call it draconian?
It's draconian in every respect. First, at YIAGA Africa, we understand and appreciate the rationale behind this bill, which is to address the question of low turnout at our elections. Nigeria is the biggest democracy in Africa, but we have the lowest turnout for elections. So we understand the rationale. But there are other ways of addressing the question of voter apathy. But a situation where, as a democracy, we are passing or are attempting to pass a law that seeks to compel or make voting compulsory does three things. The first thing is assault on the constitutional rights that voters have. Secondly, not voting at elections is a constitutional right. It's also a form of participation. And then, you know, imposing fines such as 6 months imprisonment, I think it's really a legislative overkill, and it's draconian in every respect. And it's our considered opinion that that bill should die a premature death.
Interesting. Samson is also a lawyer, by the way, but Frank Tietie, do you agree with him? Already, you have seen Nigerians who jokingly are asking, is there enough prison space because his vote or be jailed? But Frank Tietie, legally speaking, does this infringe on any rights, fundamental or otherwise?
A whole lot of rights will be infringed upon if this ever passes to become law, which I very, very much doubt. And I also consider it as a waste of precious legislative time and resources. We haven't been that poor. You know, the master election, observer here can give us the statistics, you know, that when we started in 1999, we had 52% of voter turnout, which improved further to 69% in 2003. 20 years later, it became 28%. So because our political actors have a way of making Nigerians scapegoats, you know, they take the blame for every bad form of action or governance they have done. You know, so what has been responsible for the low voter turnout or the apathy in general? Is because of the way government has been run. If 20 years ago, 69% of registered voters turned up in our national elections, that's commendable. So we don't really have a problem. Now, what this bill seeks to which I find very offensive as someone who has a background in human rights, is that you take away the foundation, the very essence of democracy, which is freedom. And then the social construct, the social order of Nigeria, according to Section 14 of the Constitution, is Nigeria operates a social order of freedom, equality, and justice. You don't take it away from people. And then this command and control mentality, which is militaristic, it's unknown to our culture, to our historical precedent. It doesn't matter how many times the military attempted to, to derail the democratic process of this country. You don't come and then impose things on people. It's not undemocratic. It's good. And I'm surprised that the very brilliant minds in the House of Representatives that are actually pushing this. I'm happy that they still have some people like Honorable Abiante who's talking sense to them. The thing that is being operated in other countries does not mean you impose it here, because law has to reflect a measure of historical and cultural context of the people. So it's unknown, it's offensive, it's going to cause a lot of trouble. But again, in Nigeria, when politicians do things, they usually underline on an unspoken reason why they do these things, because they don't just act. They act for political benefits. Well, see, it's easy when you compel, neutral persons who would be otherwise neutral to vote. Then it is easy to sway them. And so you're trying to say that you want to dissuade people from the acts of vote buying. No, it will easily buy the votes of persons who are undecided that you have compelled to vote. Okay. So I don't think it's very wholesome.
Interesting. There are others who think that this is also to silence the opposition voice, because if I do not vote, it's a form of protest. Perhaps because I don't have a choice or a candidate. And so if you now say it is compulsory for me to vote, I have to vote for your candidate. But that's one thought. Samson, let me come back to you, because proponents of this bill, point to democracies like Australia, Belgium, Brazil, Peru, where compulsory voting has actually shown that civic participation has increased. So why not Nigeria? Why not Nigeria? And then you have spent years, like Frank Tietie said, promoting youth and civic engagement, isn't it frustrating that despite your efforts, you're seeing a decline? I mean, we had less than 30% come out in the last election.
The fundamental question is, why are Nigerians not coming out to cast their vote? And Frank has highlighted a couple of reasons. See, if governance does not deliver, if people's life does not improve, and they cannot reconcile, their participation in elections with the quality of their livelihood, there's no reason why they will show up to cast their vote. Secondly, if people don't believe that their vote will count at elections, it makes no sense for them to come out to cast their vote. The biggest challenge that we have ahead of the next election is, how do we inspire confidence on the part of Nigerians that their votes will count? That when they go out to cast their vote, we will not see 3 different result sheets from one polling unit. We will not see cases where collation officers will mutilate results, on the day of elections. We will not see cases where the final arbiter, the person, the institution that decides the final vote, is the judiciary. If those things are eliminated, you would see more people come to cast their vote. We are a country, to a large extent, that does not uphold the right to vote. There are categories of voters that don't cast their vote. I can't remember the last time I did so you voted at elections. Security agencies,
as an essential worker on election day,
exactly.
I've never voted.
You've never voted.
Yes.
This is why the proposed bill around early voting will fix that problem. Diaspora voting. If you introduce diaspora voting, introduce early voting, introduce prisoners voting, you'll be creating spaces for other people to participate in the electoral process, and that should be our priority, as opposed to making it compulsory for people to cast their vote.
In other words, are you saying we're putting the cat before the horse? Are you saying this is, or there's no, justification for it at all? There are no good sides to it? Is that what you're saying?
I think we're investing legislative resources in a wrong place. I think what we should do, if the National Assembly, and again, let's make the point that the thinking, the thought behind this bill is a laudable one. You want to fix a problem, and that's the question of low turnout at elections.
Yes.
For me, I actually see it as the lawmakers even caring about political legitimacy, because they know that the more people disengage from the process, the outcome cannot be declared legitimate. Because how can you say that in a country you have governors determined by just 10% of registered voters? That's totally unacceptable. However, it is important to underscore the fact that you cannot fix the question about civic participation and turnout by compulsory voting. There are other ways to do that. Inspire trust and confidence. Let government deliver good and services to the people. And then create spaces where all these administrative bottlenecks, like no PVC, no vote, those things should be eliminated, especially when you have BVAS that functions optimally, has the voters register on it. People with your national ID or any form of official identification, once you show up at the polling unit, you're able to cast your vote.
All right. Frank Tietie, there are those who say voting is a civic duty. So if we can mandate payment of taxes, driving licenses, national ID registration, and you criminalize tax evasion, why is voting the most important civic duty off limits to compulsion?
Taxation is a constitutional duty, but voting is a constitutional right. So they should make that distinction. I think that the House of Representatives can do better and do more by getting Nigerians more interested in the issues of governance, which is more or less like another form of voter education, which is not supposed to be left alone to YIAGA, but to include politicians themselves who operate political parties. Now, let's imagine that the House of Representatives is trying to enact a law by making accountability compulsory to Nigerians. that will trigger interest in the political
Accountability
process.
on the part of who?
Accountability on the part of politicians, on the part of political office
parties,
holders. Yes.
INEC.
Let's have, for example, why can't we have a law that says that all councillors must give weekly reports to their constituents or whatever,
or be jailed,
or whatever, and then members of the House of Assembly must hold monthly, town hall meetings with their constituents, and then ministers and all that must also give weekly briefings, and police and law enforcement agents must account for every one person or whatever happens in their police stations or their formations every day. Now, when when you bring people, in touch with governance, and then they realize that they have a right to participate, because in Nigeria, every Nigerian has a right to participate and assess government. Now, like I said, where did this problem start? When in 2003, 69% of Nigerian voters will turn up an election, and then in 20 years later, you have only 28%. It's because something is wrong, somebody is failing. And don't come and start blaming Nigerians and intending to punish them. In fact, it gets me really, really very offended to now say, because of your failures, Nigerians are uninterested. Including those who believe that political neutrality is a right. You are now saying that, look, you must vote, or else I'll punish you just because you were failed. No, go back to work and do some good homework, make governance, attractive, make it something that people will be interested in. And then people will say, look, this guy, I can do better than him. Look, I'll go mobilize votes for the next election and all kind of things.
All right.
So political activity is on the decline because people are like the respected, brilliant Samson has said, people have lost interest. There's trust deficit. But that can be restored with some measure of transparency and responsibility on the part of the political class. And the speaker should start that.
Somebody just said this is the calmest I've seen Frank Tietie. But to both of you, as we wrap up this conversation, should this proposed bill, pass through, do you foresee any constitutional legal challenges that may arise, Frank Tietie, and then for Samson Tietie, if not coercion? Yes. Are you saying, perhaps I should put it this way, are you saying we haven't seen any reforms despite the billions we dedicate to reforms with INEC every election cycle? If that's the case, then shouldn't we be questioning why we're even funding INEC that much in the first place? And if you say that there have been no reforms for us to now have coercion, what then should we do? So, Frank Tietie, start.
The law cannot pass. How? It offends the Constitution, Section 17.
It's past second reading.
No, it's all waste of time. How? You are offending the entire Nigerian system. Let me tell you, this is my country, right?
Yes.
I'm very familiar with it. I'm familiar with the people. Anytime you create any form of regulation, what you get is all sort of black market actions. And that's why you find that you just enlarge the space for more corruption, which is endemic, which you're trying to deal with. So people will now start, people now find a way to circumvent it because they don't like it. You can't force people. This is not, how? In a democracy, so to speak.
Should it pass? What will you do?
It will not pass.
Okay. Samson.
Actually, just to
Itodo.
say that in some climes, like places like Paraguay, where you have this, even though they have imposition of fine and imprisonment, they've not been able to enforce it.
But we've seen it in Australia.
Yeah, you've seen it in Australia.
Because it's an advanced
Brazil,
Peru. I think this bill will die a premature death. If it passes, rest assured that Nigerians are going to challenge it because it's antithetical to the constitutional
and
rights.
unenforceable.
Yeah, and the point you make about, yes, there are incremental reforms that have been introduced.
But not enough to put compulsory
It's not
voting.
enough because I think what we should be focused on is mandatory electronic transmission of results, the issue relating to the appointments of INEC commissioners, issues around early voting, and more importantly, ensuring that every election petition or pre-election matter should be dispensed off with before swearing in.
All right. Thank you so much, gentlemen. Samson Itodo, the founder of YIAGA Africa, and lawyer as well as Arise News analyst Frank Tietie. It's interesting that both of you are on the same page today.